Rain dots the cracked shop window in uneven patterns, some trails racing downward while others cling and tremble, held in place by grime and age. The glass bows slightly inward, warped by decades of temperature and neglect, turning the grey world outside into a distorted smear of fields and road. Each drop arrives with a faint tick, a patient, repetitive sound that fills the space where voices should be. The rain has been falling long enough to soak into the building itself, darkening the wood, swelling joints, and drawing out a smell of damp paper and old varnish. A handwritten sign hangs from a single wire at the center of the window. Antiques. The letters are thick, uneven, pressed hard with a fading marker that has bled into the cardboard. The sign sways with every breath of wind, slow and deliberate, as if testing its own balance. The wire squeaks faintly where it twists, a small tired protest. Each swing changes the way the light enters the shop, briefly dimming and then restoring the dull glow inside. Within the shop, shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, crowded with objects that no longer belong anywhere else. Porcelain cups with spiderweb cracks, yellowed lace folded with care, tarnished metal tools whose purposes are no longer obvious. Dust rests on everything in thick, undisturbed layers, rising in slow clouds when the air shifts. It smells dry beneath the damp, like paper sealed in boxes for too long, like rooms that have been closed and forgotten. Near the center of the room, a porcelain doll sits upright on a wooden chair that is slightly too tall for it. Its posture is careful and balanced, legs together, hands resting flat against its skirt. The chair's seat bears a darker stain where moisture has settled, and the doll's weight presses into it without a sound. The doll's painted eyes reflect the low light without warmth, catching the dull shine from the window and holding it. The hem of the doll's dress is damp, the fabric darker where it has absorbed water. Tiny droplets cling to the stitching, heavier than they should be, threatening to fall but refusing to let go. The rest of the dress remains dry, stiff with age, its faded pattern barely visible beneath years of handling. The contrast makes the dampness feel recent, out of place, as if the doll has just been set down after coming in from the rain. No footsteps move anywhere near the chair. The floorboards remain still, their usual creaks absent. The back rooms are silent, the air heavy and unmoving. Dust does not shift. Nothing brushes against the shelves. The shop feels paused, as though it is holding its breath, waiting for something that has already happened or is about to. Above the door, the small brass bell hangs from a bent hook, its surface dulled and pitted. Without warning, it rings. Not loudly, but clearly enough to cut through the hush. The sound is sharp and brief, the kind made by a door being opened with purpose. The bell swings once, then twice, before settling back into place. The door itself does not move. The rain continues to tap against the glass. The sign keeps swaying. The doll remains seated, upright and still, its damp hem dark against the dry fabric above. The bell stops ringing, leaving the shop exactly as it was before, except for the sound that now lingers in the air, refusing to fade. Margaret stands close to the chair, close enough to feel the chill that seems to gather around the doll, even with the shop closed tight against the rain. She lifts a folded cloth and wipes gently across the porcelain face, moving with the practiced care she uses on fragile things. Dust smears, then lifts away, leaving the painted skin smooth and pale. The surface does not warm beneath her touch. It remains cold, unnaturally so, as if the temperature of the rain outside has soaked straight through it. Her fingers slow as they move along the doll's cheek. The cloth catches slightly, dragging over a thin line she hadn't noticed before. Margaret lowers the fabric and leans closer, her breath fogging the air just in front of the face. A hairline crack runs from the edge of one painted eye toward the temple, so fine it nearly disappears when the light shifts. She presses her lips together, irritation flickering across her expression, already calculating the effort it will take to repair or disguise the damage. The shop answers her stillness with a sound. A faint creak rolls through the shelves and floorboards, deep and tired, like old wood adjusting to weight or moisture. It is the kind of noise the building makes on its own, familiar after years inside it, yet it arrives at the wrong moment, too closely timed to her pause. Margaret straightens slightly, listening. The creak fades, leaving behind the soft tick of rain on glass. Her gaze drops to the doll's feet. The porcelain shoes are glossy, their surface is beaded with moisture that reflects the dim light. A droplet gathers at the edge of one heel, swelling before finally letting go. It falls and strikes the wooden floor with a quiet tap, followed by another and then another. Small dark spots bloom where the water lands, spreading into the grain of the boards. Margaret's brow tightens as she watches the puddle form. She lifts the doll's foot an inch, then sets it back down, checking the chair, the seat, the space beneath. There is no obvious source for the water. Her frown deepens, a line pulling down between her eyes, irritation mixing with unease she refuses to name. She wipes her damp fingers against her apron, the fabric already marked by years of similar gestures. The air in the shop feels heavier than it did moments ago. The smell of wet cloth and old dust mingles, sharp and unpleasant. Somewhere above, the bell over the door sways once without ringing, disturbed by no visible movement. Margaret exhales through her nose, a controlled breath meant to steady herself, and returns the cloth to the doll's face as if finishing a task left incomplete. Outside, the rain begins to thin. The steady tapping softens into an uneven rhythm, longer pauses stretching between drops. Light shifts through the window as the clouds loosen, turning the grey just slightly brighter. The sign in the glass slows its swaying, each movement smaller than the last, the wire no longer squeaking in protest. Inside, the doll remains seated, its cracked eye catching the new light at a sharper angle. Water still clings to the shoes, though no more drops fall. Margaret lowers the cloth, her eyes lingering on the fine fracture in the porcelain, on the dark spots soaking into the floor beneath. As the rain outside continues to ease, the silence inside the shop grows more pronounced, settling around her and the doll together. Night settles over the shop without ceremony, seeping in through the warped window frames and the thin gaps beneath the door. The earlier light has drained away, leaving only the dim glow of a single bulb near the counter. Shadows stretch longer than they should, pooling beneath shelves and chairs. The air cools as the rain-soaked walls release the day's chill, and the smell of damp wood thickens, pressing close. The porcelain doll remains seated where Margaret left it, centered in the room. Its pale face turns slightly toward the door. The chair beneath it does not shift. The darkened spots on the floor have spread and dulled, no longer glossy but still visible, like stains that refuse to dry. Dust drifts slowly through the weak light, settling again on shelves and shoulders of forgotten objects. From outside, wind begins to move through the fields, low and persistent. It finds its way into the building, pushing gently against the front door. The wood flexes inward with a soft strain. The door rattles once, then stills. The bell above it hangs motionless, silent despite the movement, its metal dull and heavy. In the back room, a rough cough breaks the quiet. Thomas sits alone, shoulders hunched, breath dragging through his chest with effort. Each inhale sounds shallow, each exhale frayed at the edges. The sound echoes faintly down the narrow hallway, brushing against stacked boxes and leaning frames before reaching the main room. The doll does not move as the sound reaches it. Another gust presses against the building. The door shifts again, harder this time, wood scraping against its frame. The shelves answer with a low groan, a ripple of tiny sounds passing through glass and porcelain as objects settle into new positions. Somewhere something taps lightly, then stops. The cough resumes in the back, weaker now, spaced farther apart. A pair of headlights sweeps past the window as a truck moves along the road outside. For a brief moment, white light washes across the shop, sliding over shelves and walls. The doll's shadow stretches across the floor, long and distorted, reaching toward the back hallway. As the light passes, the shadow snaps back into itself, leaving the room darker than before. The wind eases, then returns, testing the door once more. This time it pushes just enough for the door to shift inward a fraction, wood complaining softly. The bell remains still, refusing to sound. The silence that follows feels deliberate, held in place as tightly as the dust on the shelves. In the back room, the coughing stops. The shop listens. The bulb hums faintly overhead. Outside, the wind continues to move through the fields, carrying the smell of wet earth. Inside, the doll sits upright in its chair, cold and patient, as the night settles fully around the building. Morning arrives slowly, filtered through low clouds that press flat against the sky. Pale light slips through the shop window, dull and colorless, revealing the room exactly as it was left. The chair still stands in the center. The doll still sits upright. The stains on the floor have darkened further, spread thin by the night air. Nothing carries the relief of a new day. Margaret enters from the back hallway, her steps uneven, her shoulders drawn tight. She pauses just inside the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. The smell reaches her first. Stale air, damp wood, something faintly metallic. Her eyes move ahead of her body, scanning the shop, confirming the stillness, the silence, the absence of sound she expected but did not hear. She calls for Thomas without raising her voice. The sound barely travels before it dies. No answer comes back. Her breathing quickens as she moves down the narrow hall, her hand trailing along the wall for balance. The floorboards do not creak beneath her. Even the building seems reluctant to respond. The back room is colder than the rest of the shop. Thomas lies on the floor beside the work table, one arm bent awkwardly beneath him. His face is turned toward the wall, lips parted, eyes unfocused. The inhaler rests beneath a chair leg a short distance away, close enough to see, far enough to matter. Margaret freezes, her body refusing to close the space between them. Her gaze drops, then lifts again as if repetition might change what she sees. She kneels slowly, the joints in her knees protesting, and reaches toward his shoulder. She stops just short of touching him. The air feels wrong here. Too heavy, too still. Her hand trembles, then falls back to her side. She rises again and turns, backing out of the room as if afraid of disturbing something fragile. Her eyes flick down the hallway toward the shop. The doll stands beside the doorway now, no longer seated. Its feet rest flat on the floorboards, shoes aligned neatly, dress hanging straight. Its head tilts slightly to one side, the cracked eye catching the weak morning light. Margaret's breath catches in her throat. She stares at the space between the chair and the doorway, measuring the distance without moving. The chair remains where it was, untouched. No marks trail across the floor. No explanation presents itself. Her hands curl into fists at her sides, nails biting into her palms. Outside, the rain begins again, light at first, then steadier, tapping against the window in the same patient rhythm as the day before. Margaret does not look away from the doll. The shop holds its breath with her, the silence thick and unyielding as the morning settles around the body in the back room and the figure standing quietly in the hall. The shop does not change after Thomas is found. The chair remains in the center of the room. The doll stands where Margaret last saw it, near the hallway, its small shoes aligned with the floorboards as if placed with care. Light from the window shifts as clouds move, but nothing inside responds. The air feels sealed, heavy with the knowledge of what waits in the back room. Margaret moves mechanically. She retrieves a coat, her hands clumsy with shock, buttons slipping through her fingers. She does not approach the doll again. Instead, she circles wide around it, keeping her back to the wall, eyes fixed forward. Each step feels measured, cautious, as though the floor might betray her if she moves too quickly. The bell above the door remains silent as she opens it and steps out into the damp morning. Hours later, the shop fills with unfamiliar movement. Shoes track moisture across the floor. Voices murmur low, careful, stopping short when they reach the back hallway. Margaret sits rigid in a chair near the counter, hands folded tightly in her lap. She answers questions with nods and brief motions of her head. Her eyes drift again and again toward the doll, still standing, untouched by anyone else. At some point, the doll is lifted. A pair of gloved hands hesitates before gripping its porcelain shoulders. The cold surface reflects the overhead light as it is turned, examined, weighed. Water still clings faintly to the shoes, though the floor beneath them is dry now. Someone mutters, then sets the doll back down, farther from the hallway this time, nearer the window. A small paper tag appears tied loosely around the doll's wrist. Sold, written in block letters. The string bites slightly into the porcelain, leaving a faint mark. Margaret watches this without comment, her face drawn and distant. The transaction is handled quietly, efficiently, as though removing the object from the room might also remove what happened there. By afternoon, the shop empties again. The body is gone. The questions stop. Margaret stands alone once more among the shelves and dust. She does not clean. She does not sit. She simply watches as the doll is carried out through the front door, the bell ringing this time, clear and unavoidable. The sound lingers after the door closes. The rain outside has slowed to a mist. The vehicle pulls away, tires hissing on wet pavement. Through the window, Margaret sees the doll's pale face one last time as it is laid gently in the back seat. The crack near its eye flashes briefly in the grey light, then disappears as the door shuts. When the shop finally falls quiet again, the emptiness feels sharper than before. The chair in the center looks wrong without its weight. The stains on the floor remain. Margaret lowers herself onto a stool behind the counter, shoulders sagging. Outside, the mist thickens, blurring the road as the doll moves farther away, carrying the silence of the shop with it. The house is quiet when Evelyn Carter unlocks the door. The kind of quiet that feels maintained rather than natural. The air inside smells sharply of bleach and lemon cleaner, layered over something older that refuses to leave. Plastic sheets cover the couch and chairs, pulled tight so they do not wrinkle. Every surface reflects light without warmth. She carries the box carefully, arms locked, shoulders tense, as if any shift in balance might matter. She sets the box down on the kitchen table and pauses, listening. The refrigerator hums. A clock ticks somewhere down the hall. Nothing else moves. Evelyn exhales through her nose and opens the box, folding the flaps back with deliberate precision. The porcelain doll rests inside, wrapped in thin paper that has absorbed a trace of moisture. The sold tag still hangs from its wrist, the string slightly darkened. Evelyn lifts the doll and carries it through the house, her steps soft and controlled. She avoids brushing against walls or furniture. At the end of the hallway, she stops and looks up at the shelf she has cleared earlier that morning. It is empty, wiped clean, aligned perfectly with the others. She places the doll there facing outward, its feet just at the edge, its dress hanging straight. She steps back and studies it. The crack near the eye catches the overhead light, more visible here than it was in the shop. Evelyn reaches for a cloth and wipes the porcelain face, then the hands, then the shoes. The surface remains cool beneath her fingers. She wipes again, harder this time, until the cloth squeaks faintly against the glaze. When she is finished, she scrubs her hands at the sink. Water runs hot, then hotter. Soap foams and slides down the drain. She rubs until her skin reddens, until the sting sharpens her focus. She does not look at the hallway while she does this. The clock continues to tick, steady and loud. That night, the house settles into its routines. Lights dim. The hum of appliances fades. Evelyn lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths she cannot slow. The air feels thick, pressing down. From the hallway, the shelf remains still, holding its new weight without complaint. Sometime later, a faint sound moves through the house. Not a step, not quite a shift. Evelyn's eyes open. The ceiling fan above her remains still. The clock has stopped ticking. Silence stretches thin and taut until it feels ready to break. She sits up and swings her legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cool beneath her feet. The hallway light flickers once as she reaches for the switch, then steadies. The shelf at the end of the hall comes into view. The doll remains upright, unchanged, watching the length of the corridor. Evelyn takes one step forward, then another. The house holds its breath with her, the air unmoving, the silence absolute. As she moves closer to the shelf, unaware of how carefully the space around her has begun to listen. The hallway light hums faintly as Evelyn stands beneath it, her shadow stretched thin along the wall. She advances with care, placing each foot down slowly as if the floor might react. The shelf remains at the end of the corridor, clean lines undisturbed, the doll centered and balanced. The air smells faintly of bleach and warm plastic, layered with something damp that does not belong in the house. A sound comes from behind her, subtle and misplaced. Not a step, but a soft scrape, like fabric shifting against wood. Evelyn stops without turning. Her shoulders tense, rising toward her ears. The light flickers once more, long enough for the hallway to dim, then steadies again. When she breathes out, the sound feels too loud. She resumes walking. Halfway down the hall, her foot meets nothing. Her balance tips forward, sudden and sharp. She throws an arm out to steady herself, fingers brushing the wall. Her heel slips on the smooth floor and her body pitches toward the stairs she had forgotten were there, descending into darkness just beyond the edge of the light. She falls without a sound. Her body strikes the steps once, twice, then slides the rest of the way down. The noise is brief and contained, swallowed by the narrow stairwell. At the bottom, she lies twisted, one arm bent beneath her neck angled unnaturally against the final step. The light above continues to hum. At the top of the stairs, the doll rests on the landing. One shoe is missing. The other points toward the edge. Its dress has shifted slightly, the hem uneven, as if brushed by passing air. The crack near its eye glints faintly as the light catches it, then dulls again. The house settles. Pipes tick as they cool. The refrigerator resumes its low hum. Somewhere, water drips steadily into a sink, each drop spaced evenly apart. No footsteps return to the hallway. The shelf remains empty now, wiped clean earlier, holding nothing but shadow. Morning light creeps through the windows hours later, pale and indifferent. It reaches the bottom of the stairs and stops short of Evelyn's body, leaving her half in shadow. The air is still cool, the smell of bleach lingering. Nothing moves to announce what has happened. When the house is finally opened again, the silence breaks unevenly. Shoes scuff the floor. A sharp intake of breath echoes up the stairwell. The doll is found later, sitting neatly on the top step, shoe recovered and placed back in position. No one can explain how it got there. The doll is moved again, this time sealed inside a cardboard box reinforced with tape. Its porcelain face is wrapped in thin foam, the crack near the eye pressed gently out of sight. The box is loaded into the back of a delivery van under a grey afternoon sky. Rain threatens but does not fall. The air feels tight, expectant, as the doors close with a dull metallic thud. Daniel Reed grips the steering wheel harder than necessary as he drives. The van smells of oil, wet cardboard, and something faintly chemical. He keeps his eyes forward, jaw clenched, replaying the instructions he was given. Drop off behind the old antique shop. No signature needed. He tells himself it is just another item, just another job, but his foot stays light on the accelerator. Behind the shop, the alley is narrow and shadowed, bordered by brick darkened with moisture. Daniel parks and steps out, pulling his jacket tight against the chill. The sounds of the town feel distant here, muted by the walls. He opens the van and slides the box toward him, careful not to let it tip. The tape is damp to the touch. He sets the box down on a crate marked fragile and straightens, rubbing his palms together. He does not open it. He does not look at it for long. A gust of wind funnels through the alley, pushing trash along the ground and slamming the loading door behind him. The noise echoes sharply, too loud for the space. Inside the shop, something crashes. Glass shatters, followed by the sound of wood splintering. Daniel freezes, heart hammering. He turns toward the door, takes a step, then stops. His breath comes quick and shallow. Another sound follows, lower this time, like something heavy shifting and settling. He backs away instead, shoes slipping slightly on the damp pavement. His foot catches on uneven ground, and he stumbles, hands scraping against the brick as he falls. Panic sharpens his movements. He pushes himself upright and runs, breath tearing in and out of his chest, the alley stretching longer than it should. They find him later, collapsed near the street, eyes wide and fixed on nothing. His hands are raw, skin broken where he clawed at the wall. The box remains behind the shop unopened, dry despite the damp air. When it is collected, the tape has loosened slightly, just enough to suggest it was never fully sealed. The police station smells of old coffee and disinfectant, layered over damp wool from coats hung too close together. The box is carried inside without comment, set down on a metal table beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Officer Paul Keene stands nearby, arms folded, eyes tired but attentive. He watches as the tape is cut and the flaps opened, revealing the porcelain face within, pale and unmarked, except for the thin crack near the eye. The doll is logged carefully. Photographs are taken. Notes are written in neat, restrained handwriting. Keene lifts it once, surprised by its weight, then sets it back down. The porcelain is cold against his gloves. He exhales slowly, rubs his temples, and waves the others away when the task is done. The storage room door closes with a flat final sound. Hours pass. The station quiets. Phones stop ringing. Footsteps thin out and fade. The fluorescent lights hum steadily, their sound settling into the walls. Keene returns alone to the storage room, drawn back without urgency, without a clear reason. The door opens easily. The air inside feels cooler than the rest of the building. The doll no longer rests on the table. It sits on the floor instead, positioned carefully facing the doorway. Its dress is smooth, its shoes aligned. There are no scuff marks on the linoleum, no sign of movement. Keene's jaw tightens. He takes a step back, then another, eyes fixed on the small figure in front of him. He does not reach for his radio. He does not draw his weapon. He leans against the far wall instead, breath uneven, hand pressed flat against his chest as if to steady himself. The lights flicker once, sharply, and the hum cuts out for a brief, terrible second before returning. By morning, the storage room door stands open. The doll sits just outside it, facing down the hallway. Officer Keene lies against the wall where he fell, his service weapon untouched at his side. A dark stain spreads slowly beneath his head. Elsewhere in the station, the day begins as usual, unaware of how carefully the silence has arranged itself overnight. The official records close quietly. The doll is listed as misplaced during inventory. Its evidence tag noted and then struck through. The storage room is repainted. The fluorescent lights are replaced. Officer Keene's death is ruled a sudden medical event. Unfortunate but unremarkable. The hallway where the doll was found is cleaned until no stain remains. The antique shop never reopens. Boards go up over the windows, nailed in place while the weather is dry. Rain later darkens the wood, seeping into the grain. Inside, dust settles again, thicker this time, uninterrupted. The chair in the center of the room remains where it was left, slightly angled, casting a familiar shape when light slips through the cracks. Evelyn Carter's house is emptied and sold. The shelf at the end of the hallway is taken down, leaving pale rectangles on the wall where it once hung. The stairs are repaired. New paint covers the scuffs. The house smells different now, but something faint and cold lingers when the lights are off and the rooms are quiet. Months pass, then years. Stories thin and change as they move between people, losing detail, gaining distance. 5 deaths become coincidences. A doll becomes a rumor. The crack near the eye becomes an embellishment, then a joke. The silence that connected them all fades into background noise. At a flea market 2 counties over, a porcelain doll appears on a folding table beneath a striped canopy. Its dress is clean but worn thin at the hem. The porcelain shoes shine dully. A faint smell of bleach and old rain clings to the fabric. A thin crack runs beside one painted eye, barely noticeable unless the light hits it just right. A hand reaches out. The doll is lifted, weighed, considered. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings as a door opens. Clouds gather slowly overhead. The doll is set down again, upright and balanced, waiting as the air around it settles into a familiar, careful quiet.